What's up, guys? I'm going to talk about dairy today, give you guys the pros and cons and help you determine whether you want to incorporate it into your paleo or zero carb diet as well as a keto diet. So I'm going to go down the pros and cons and then kind of ramble a little bit about my personal experience. So in regards to the main reason people should consume dairy, it's for its vitamin content, and it's important to note that in the context of the standard American diet, dairy is really the only source of vitamins A and K2 that people get. You know, unless they're consuming an unusual amount of fat, and even if they are consuming an unusual amount of fat, it tends to be in butter or cheese or milk, which is dairy. So I don't really see an abundant, especially yogurt, I don't really see an abundant source of these vitamins in the standard American diet outside of dairy. Another thing to note is it's easily accessible in regards to, most supermarkets have it, people can afford it, and I guess from an agricultural standpoint, it's much more environmentally friendly and economical to feed an animal and use the milk as sustenance as opposed to slaughtering the animal. Another thing is dairy is very tasty. People really enjoy it. Whereas I can talk all day about how much I love bone marrow and beef suet. Unfortunately, butter and cream, and especially cheese, tend to be much tastier and much more palatable than those foods. And that can kind of be a negative too, but I'll talk about that on the cons. It's just something that people really enjoy and can be incorporated into a lot of recipes, as well as being one of the few foods that, people don't necessarily victimize it as much as meats and animal fats, even though it's pretty much the same saturated fat content and vitamin content. Well, not same, but dairy generally has more vitamin A and K2 than muscle meats, but not organ meats or beef fat. In the context of a paleo or a zero carb or ketogenic diet, a lot of people tend to only get these vitamins from dairy. Even though I said in the standard American diet, a lot of people the only way you're getting these vitamins otherwise is if you're consuming either organ meats or a lot of beef fat. So, and most people on zero carb aren't consuming enough like pastured animal fats and enough vitamin K2 as well as liver. And people on keto sometimes stray towards, I think keto is generally better in that regard. They eat a lot of cheese, but then they tend to lean to more processed foods too, which might hamper their vitamin absorption. And sometimes paleo people don't even go for animal fats. Paleo sometimes goes for like olive oil, coconut oil, and things like that, avocado oil, and I don't think that. But anyway, people don't really, sometimes paleo kind of falls in line with still conventional wisdom in that saturated fat might be bad for you, and they tend to who's the paleo advocate that advocates lean meats, like healthy fats as in oils. That's a bit of a misconception there. So now the cons of consuming dairy, main one is inflammatory factors. So I have a casein allergy and a lactose allergy, so I can't consume milk or cream or butter without taking antihistamine. And I did that for a few months, but I, decided that it was just too much and decided to not eat it. So, this kind of knocks out dairy for a large portion of the population. That's not to note that, a lot of times people don't. The reason I stopped was because I was getting so much acne. I had enough of it. But sometimes people have inflammatory factors without acne, and that's kind of why they consume it. So, and personally, if I didn't get acne, I'd probably be consuming dairy myself. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And the secondary reason would be it's relating to its palatability and how much people enjoy dairy. I could personally, after scarfing down a 2-pound ribeye and some beef fat, I'll be full, I'll be happy. But if you put, a half a pound of cream with berries in front of me, I could probably eat it. Same with like cheese, 2 pounds of cheese on eggs. I think it kind of goes like butter at the bottom, then cream, then cheese in regards to how much you can eat. They become more and more palatable, and butter's at the bottom because it's purely fat, has that nice, almost sweet, grassy butterfat flavor, but cream has a slightly higher sugar content. It goes down a bit easier, and it has more of that milk flavor that people enjoy. So I think cream kind of ranks above butter in palatability. Then cheese, mainly because fermented foods tend to have, I hate to use the word umami, I really hate that word, but the fermented flavor that develops in those cheeses adds more of a complexity to it that allows you to consume more of it. And that's something really important to note that most people overlook. And if you're looking at, a a zero carb or keto, whatever diet you're looking at, and they say eat till you're full. Well, that's not necessarily true, because depending on the foods you eat, you're going to be able to eat much more of certain foods than other foods. Someone who eats a pound of ribeye and a dozen eggs every day would, might be able to eat much more than someone who just eats a pound and a half of ribeye. The palatability of foods and variety and all those things play a pretty big importance. So let's rank, since we were ranking the palatability, let's go really quickly over the fats I recommend people consume in regards to not being inflammatory, and I guess in regards to nutrient density. So raw pastured dairy from local grass-fed sources is up there with raw pastured marrow and beef suet and animal fat. Then it kind of goes down to like grass-fed from the supermarket, grass-fed from maybe not as good pasture, like Finlandia butter, Kerrygold butter. After that, it kind of doesn't really matter. It kind of goes down to like commercial butter, commercial fat, stuff I don't really consume or like the taste of, so I won't really go into that too much. The point being is that raw pasture dairy is incredibly good for you from a nutrient standpoint, and that's very hard to overlook that. So I have to really say that if you don't have access to raw pasture fat or a good source of vitamin K2 in your diet, Kerrygold butter, Finlandia butter are excellent sources of these vitamins. Especially anyone that tolerates dairy or is on the standard American diet, I can really advocate for consuming it and incorporating it into a diet as just a healthy part of metabolic, making sure all your metabolic processes run properly by consuming enough dairy. And I'll touch on the calcium a little bit. So most animal products have a certain amount of calcium, and you don't actually need much calcium in your blood to have healthy bones. But there's a bit of a misconception around blood calcium versus actual calcium in the bones, because when you get a blood test, they're measuring your blood calcium. That's not necessarily indicative of you might just be flushing excess calcium out your body 24/7 from consuming so much of it. What causes calcium to be absorbed into your bones is a hormone. One of them is called calcidiol, and that's activated by consuming vitamin D3, which requires vitamin A and K2 to be metabolized. And then the calcium is absorbed in the kidneys. So it's more important that you consume these vitamins than consuming actual calcium. So I will talk briefly about my experience with dairy and kind of what I used to consume. So there's a farm in Pennsylvania that I eat wild, real milk, local harvest. Just look around. Sometimes I go down to the Union Square Farmers Market. You can get really nice like yellow, deep orange pastured butter if you look around for it, and that stuff can be expensive. Sometimes you pay $8 or $9 a pound, sometimes you pay 10 or 12 a pound, and honestly, like paying $4 or $5 in the supermarket was much more economical, and that's kind of what I did. I started buying Kerrygold and Finlandia butter myself. But if you want to try it and you have a disposable income, it's nice to spend the extra money on a tastier product. Although the butter isn't really that much better in my experience, but when I had access to raw pastured cream and raw butter, it was definitely something I enjoyed, especially the cream. I mean, I will never eat regular cream again after having raw grass-fed cream. And in regards to cheese, fortunately there are a lot of raw cheeses in stores now, and that's probably the most easily accessible form of raw dairy. So, as I said, I encourage you guys to really incorporate dairy into your diet, as it's going to be beneficial for the majority of you. And as I said, if you can't consume it, the things I mentioned, like raw marrow, raw beef fat, and obviously any animal fat, whether you buy a whole duck and eat the skin and the kidney fat of the duck, or whether you eat all the fat on the chicken, or whatever foods you're eating, as long as you can incorporate more fats into your diet in many other ways. Now, clarified butter is a touchy one. I think it's pretty hard to get all the casein out 100% unless you're, and then to buy it from some sort of laboratory where they actually have, not laboratory, but a facility where they have the machinery to filter out almost all the casein, it's probably a bit uneconomical. And honestly, I remember I didn't have as much problems with ghee and clarified butter as regular butter. That's definitely an option to look into. Something that should very well be considered. So I think I've talked plenty about this subject for you guys, and hopefully you can take something from this discussion.